I had always wanted to take a solo camping trip. I had watched countless hours of people doing them on YouTube, and after I had saved up some money, I decided to buy all the gear I needed and headed to the nearby national forest. It was a 5-hour drive to get there, so I set off just after dawn. I listened to a few podcasts and sang my heart out for the rest of the way. The time flew by, especially as I got closer to arriving. The views were exciting. The mountains rose from the ground all over me. It was almost a fearful sight, but the clear water and falling leaves washed any fear away. I arrived at the parking area just after midday. It was pretty empty, mainly to it being the middle of the week in October. There were 2 cars, but it seemed like I would be unlikely to run into anybody, which was fine by me. I grabbed my backpack, which had pretty much everything I needed in it, and I started my hike into the forest. It was so peaceful. There was no sound of cars, just birds chirping and the wind blowing through the leaves of the trees. I was transfixed by them. After about an hour while walking, something made me stop. I thought I had seen someone standing in the tree line about 50 yards back, sharply turning around. I scanned the trees and couldn't see anything. I hiked on for another few miles and found a small clearing. Huge trees towered over. I grabbed the tent out of my large backpack and got to work setting it up. It was starting to get late by the time I had finished. I decided to make a fire and heat up some tomato soup that I had brought with me. Also, I had been camping with my father many times when I was younger. He would have loved this. I had never felt more at home than I did sitting there with the fire lit. The sounds of the birds and the calmness of the woods was pretty good. I rustled through my bag and found my phone near the bottom. There was barely any signal out here, but just enough that I had received a message from my sister asking if I had made it safely. I texted her back and set the phone down beside me. It was a little after 10 o'clock, so I decided to turn in for the night. I had another big day of hiking tomorrow. I got into the tent and zipped it up. It was only small, just enough for one person, but that was all I needed. I had my sleeping bag, a book to read, and a flashlight attached to the top of the tent. I read my book for a while and fell asleep with the book still in hand. I woke up suddenly. I didn't know what it was, but I had a bad feeling in my stomach. I reached next to me for my phone but realized I had left it outside when I put it down earlier. I was about to get up and go out to find my phone when I saw a light coming from just inside the tent by the zip. I realized it was my phone. Maybe I had picked it up and it had slipped out of my pocket, I thought, trying to reassure myself. A minute later, the phone chimed. A new message appeared on the screen. It was from an unknown number. My hands began to tremble. I shakily unlocked my phone and opened the message. "I can't see you. Why don't you come out and play?" My heart was thumping in my head. I was panicking. I didn't have any weapons with me. The best I could do was hit them with a flashlight, but that was not going to do much damage. I just sat there, not moving a muscle, trying to listen out for whether the person was nearby. Then a new wave of fear washed over me. He must have been in the tent. He picked up the phone and unzipped it. He had to be nearby, or he was before at least. I dialed 911 and told them my situation, making sure to whisper. They said they would dispatch someone immediately, but I knew it would take them hours to get here. The nearest police station was at least 2 hours away, and they would have to walk the rest of the way once they got here. After the call, another text came through from the same unknown number. "Don't be scared. The police won't find you, but I can help." I was whispering to the police. They must have been near the tent. I decided I had only one choice: try and outturn them. I'm a pretty fake guy, but the fact of the matter was, I had no idea who this person was. They could have a knife or worse, a gun. But what choice did I have? I had no way of defending myself. I waited a while, trying to build up the courage. person outside gone quiet for now, but I knew they were still out there somewhere. I decided I would take my flashlight with me and could either use it as a weapon or maybe try and blind them with the light. I quickly unzipped the tent. I burst out of it and started running. I heard a yell from behind me, a deep, unsettling voice. As I was sprinting away, I turned and looked. The man was chasing me. He looked like he stood much taller than me and wider. He looked more like a bodybuilder from what I could see. I thought I had the edge on him due to being smaller, but he was surprisingly quick. I checked back again, and this time I could see a metal bat in his hand. He was gaining on me. My legs were screaming at me in pain to stop. I ran for as long as I could, just keeping away from him. It must have been a few miles before I saw the flashing blue and white lights of the police cruiser. I looked back, and the man chasing me had stopped. I couldn't see him anymore. I ran over the police officers. I told them what had happened, and they called for more units. They put me in the back of the police cruiser and waited for backup. After what seemed like an eternity, 2 other cruisers pulled up and I was taken back to the station. I had already given my statement while waiting, but they just wanted to confirm a few details back at the station. That was a few days ago. I was so relieved to get back and relax. I have never been so scared in my life. I think my heart only just stopped racing. They haven't found the guy yet. They searched the whole forest with no luck. I'm back at home now, but I just realized he had my phone outside the tent. He could know where I live. I have always loved camping. There's something about the quiet isolation of the woods that feels both calming and unsettling at the same time. Last fall, I decided to do a solo camping trip for the weekend. My friends bailed on me last minute, but I wasn't going to let that ruin my plan. I picked my small tent, a sleeping bag, some food, a flashlight, and a small cooking knife I usually bring along for chopping vegetables or just for emergencies. I purposely picked a spot far from any official campground. Just the deep woods, no people, no noise. I parked my car on the side of a dirt road, hiked about 30 minutes in, and found a small clearing near a stream. It was perfect. I set up my tent, started a small fire, and cooked some noodles in a tin pot. By the time the sun started going down, the woods felt like they were closing in on me. The sounds of birds died out, and the insects took over. I sat by the fire, eating slowly, watching the shadows stretch out between the trees. It was the kind of silence that makes you hyper, aware of every little sound, a twig snapping, a leaf crunching. I went into my tent around 10 p.m. I lay in my sleeping bag scrolling through my phone. Though I had no service, the little knife was tucked beside me. Not because I expected trouble, but because it felt safer having it close. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, I thought it was just a dream, but then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate crunches on the forest floor. They weren't random like an animal moving around. They had weight. They had purpose. My heart started racing. I grabbed my flashlight and quietly undid the side of the tent just enough to peek outside. The beam of light cut through the trees, but there was nothing. Just shadows, branches, and the soft trickle of the stream. I sat there, frozen, listening. The footsteps stopped. For a while, I thought maybe I had imagined it. But then came the whispering. It was faint at first, like the wind carrying voices. I told myself it had to be the stream playing tricks on my ears. But the longer I listened, the more certain I was. It was whispering, two distinct voices, low and muffled, circling the perimeter of my tent. I held my breath. My fingers tightened around the knife. I wanted to call out, but my throat was dry, and deep down, I didn't want them to know I was awake. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until suddenly they stopped. That silence was worse than the voices. For minutes, I didn't move, straining to hear something, anything. Then right above my head, I felt it. The fabric of the tent pressing inward slightly, as if someone dragged their hand across it. I couldn't breathe, my whole body locked up. I kept the knife raised in one hand and the flashlight in the other, waiting for the sound of a zipper, waiting for the fabric to tear, but nothing happened. The pressure disappeared. The woods went back to silence, except for my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I must have stayed like that, frozen, for hours, because the next thing I remember is waking up to sunlight streaming into the tent. At first, everything looked normal. The clearing was calm, the fire had gone cold, and the trees stood silently around me. But when I walked outside to stretch, I noticed something on the far side of my tent. Long, dark smears across the fabric, like muddy fingers had been dragged across it during the night. That was enough for me. I packed my things in record time and hiked back to my car without looking back once. To this day, can't explain the whispers or the marks. Maybe it was a prank, maybe it was someone messing with me. But in the middle of the woods, with no sign of another soul for miles, I know that I felt I wasn't alone. I have always liked the idea of challenging myself, of doing something out of the ordinary. That's why one cold winter weekend, I decided to go camping alone in a remote forest. All of my friends thought I was crazy, but I brushed it off. I drove out there in my old car, with my tent, sleeping bag, and just enough food to last me through the night. When I arrived, the sun was already beginning to set. The light flirted weakly through the bare branches of the trees, and the air was sharp and biting. I parked my car on a narrow dirt path and carried my gear deeper into the woods. The silence was overwhelming. No traffic, no voices, not even the usual sounds of birds. Just crunch of my boots and the frozen ground and the sound of my own breath. I found a small clearing, set up my tent, and lit a small fire. For a while, it felt peaceful. I sat near the fire, eating a simple meal, watching a smoke curl up into the night sky. The forest around me was dark, completely still, as if it were holding its breath. Eventually, I put out the fire, crawled into my tent, and tried to settle in for the night. The cold crept in immediately, biting through the fabric of the tent. I wrapped myself tightly in my sleeping bag, telling myself I'd be fine. I closed my eyes, trying to ignore how alone I really was out there. That's when I heard it. At first, it was so faint, I thought I was imagining things. A soft, distant whistling sound. A tune, almost cheerful, but faint, carried by the wind. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. I told myself it was nothing, just the wind through the trees. But the sound came again, clearer this time. Someone was whistling. I sat up slowly, holding my breath. The whistling stopped for a moment, then it started again. Closer now. It was steady, deliberate, like someone walking through the forest, whistling the same short tune over and over. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I fumbled for my flashlight, but I was too afraid to turn it on. The last thing I wanted was to draw attention to myself. I just sat there in the dark, listening as the whistling crept closer and closer. Then, silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, unnatural. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until my chest began to ache. And then, footsteps. Slow, crunching footsteps moving around the outside of my tent. I could see the shadow of someone through the same fabric. They were standing right outside. For a moment, everything went still. Then a voice, low and unsettling, broke the silence.
Aren't you going to invite me in?
I felt ice run through my veins. The voice was wrong. It was calm, almost playful, but there was something in it that made my stomach twist. I couldn't answer. I couldn't even move. I just sat there, paralyzed. The shadow didn't move. Whoever it was stood there, waiting. Finally, out of pure desperation, I forced myself to speak. My voice cracked as I yelled.
Get out of here. I've got a weapon.
The words stumbled out before I even thought about them. But the truth was, I didn't have anything. No knife, no gun, nothing. It was just a lie. The only thing I could think of in that moment. There was a pause. Then, slowly, I heard the footsteps again, crunching in the snow, moving away from the tent, step by step. They faded into the distance until the forest was silent again. I sat in that tent for what felt like hours, too terrified to move. My body was shaking uncontrollably, every little sound making me jump. Finally, after what must have been an hour, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave. I shoved my things into my backpack, zipped the tent shut, and stumbled toward my car. The forest was dead quiet. I kept telling myself the person was gone, that I was safe. But as I reached the edge of the clearing, I made the mistake of looking back. Between the trees, half hidden in the darkness, I saw him, a figure, tall and completely still, just watching me. I couldn't make out his face, but I knew it was him, the one who had been whistling, the one who had stood outside my tent. I didn't wait. I sprinted to my car, threw my gear in the back, and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely give the keys in the ignition. When the engine finally roared to life, I sped out of there without looking back. Even now, I can still hear that sound in my head, that simple, cheerful whistle echoing through the trees. And I can still feel the weight of his eyes on me, watching, waiting.